The email arrived while I was standing in a half-finished office with a tape measure in my hand. The subject line said, "New resident verification." I owned one small rental condo in South St. Louis, and I had not approved a new resident. I opened the attachment, and it was a lease for my condo. My sister Megan had signed the landlord line, and I read that line 3 times. Then I checked the address. It was mine. The lease gave a woman named Leah the entire condo for a year, and the rent was $1,500 a month. Megan had also taken a security deposit. I had never met Leah. I had never offered my condo for rent to her. I had never given Megan authority to rent it to anyone, and at the bottom, Megan had typed her full name beneath the word landlord. That was the part that made my hands go cold. She had moved in because she needed somewhere safe for 3 months. She had promised to pay utilities and get back on her feet. Now she was promising my property to someone else, and she expected me to accept it after the fact. I called the condo manager before I called my sister, and Carla answered on the second ring. She sounded surprised when I told her I had not signed the lease, and Megan had uploaded it to request a parking permit for Leah. Carla had assumed Megan was managing the unit for me, and I told her she was not. Then I asked her not to approve anything until I figured out what had happened. "Do you want me to delete the document?" Carla asked. "No, please leave it where it is." That answer surprised even me. My first instinct was to make the whole thing disappear. My second was better, and I wanted a clean record of exactly what Megan had submitted and when. I took screenshots. I saved the attachment. Then I stood in that dusty office and tried to understand how a favor had turned into a claim of ownership. Would you call that a misunderstanding? I couldn't. A misunderstanding is using the wrong parking space, and this had my sister's signature on a landlord line she did not own. And before that week was over, she would look me in the face and tell me the condo was more hers than mine. I was 33 then, and I worked as a construction project coordinator for a regional commercial contractor. My job was not glamorous. I lived in schedules, change orders, subcontractor calls, and rooms that smelled like drywall dust. I was good at noticing when one small detail could become an expensive problem, and that habit was probably why I bought the condo in the first place. I had spent years carefully saving for it. I did not inherit it. No relative handed me a down payment. I bought it after paying off my student loans and building an emergency fund that I refused to touch. The place was modest, but it was mine. For almost 2 years, I rented the condo to a quiet couple. They moved when one of them took a job in Kansas City, and I planned to clean the place, replace the dishwasher, and list it again. Then Megan called me on a Tuesday night in February. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her, and her relationship had ended. The apartment she shared with her boyfriend was in his name. He wanted her out by the end of the week, and Megan had a job at a salon, but she had almost no savings. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment across town when she asked if she could stay with me. My couch folded out, but barely. Megan and I had tried living together once in college. We lasted 11 days. I loved my sister, but sharing one bathroom with her again sounded like a bad experiment. Then I thought about the empty condo. "You can use my place for 3 months, I told her. She stopped crying. "Seriously? 3 months, no rent, you cover utilities." "Oh my God, Nora. And no roommates or subletting." "Obviously. I mean it. I know." I also told her not to make changes without asking me. No painting, no new locks, no pets without checking the building rules, and she could have friends over, of course. It was a home, not a holding cell, and I just wanted the arrangement to stay temporary and simple. Megan agreed to everything in under a minute. She called me the best sister in the world, and 2 days later, I met her at the condo with a spare key and a bag of groceries. She hugged me in the kitchen, and her face was blotchy from crying. I remember feeling relieved that I could solve one problem for her. That was my weakness with Megan. I liked being useful, and I had been the organized one in our family for as long as I could remember. Megan was the one who forgot forms, lost chargers, missed deadlines, and turned every bad week into a weather system. I learned early that peace returned faster when I fixed things, and our mother, Diane, never said I was responsible for Megan. She did not have to. She would call me and ask, "Have you talked to your sister?" That question usually meant Megan had a problem, and it also meant Mom hoped I could make the problem smaller. For years, I told myself that helping was my choice. Most of the time, it was, and I paid for Megan's tire once when she was short on cash. She paid me back. I helped her rewrite a resume. She got a better job. Those favors felt normal. They had an ending. The condo was supposed to have an ending too. For the first month, it did. Megan texted me pictures of the clean kitchen. She bought a cheap little table for the balcony. She transferred the electric bill into her name, and she sent me a photo of the receipt after she replaced a broken shower curtain rod with my permission. I relaxed. That was my first mistake, and by the second month, Megan sounded stronger. She had picked up more hours at the salon, and she told me she had started saving. She talked about neighborhoods she liked and what kind of apartment she could afford, and I believed we were moving toward the plan we had made. Then the small changes started to show. She asked if she could move my boxed-up lamps from the hall closet to my storage cage downstairs. I said yes. A week later, she told me she had rearranged the spare bedroom because it felt dead. I did not care. Furniture could move back. Then she changed the name on the little paper label inside the mailbox. It used to say Ellis, which was both our last name. She replaced it with Megan Ellis in thick black marker, and I noticed it when I stopped by with a package. The change was tiny. It was also the first time I felt something shift. "You really made it official," I joked. Megan smiled. "Someone has to make this place look lived in. It is lived in. You know what I mean?" I did not really, but I let it go. At the end of the third month, I called about her move-out plan, and Megan asked for 6 more weeks. The apartment she wanted had fallen through, and her credit score had improved, but the deposit would wipe out most of what she had saved. She said she was close. I hesitated, then I said yes. I did not update our arrangement in writing, and I did not restate every boundary. I told myself 6 weeks was nothing. I told myself she had been careful with the place. I told myself family should not need paperwork for every act of kindness. That was my second mistake. 6 weeks became another month because Megan found a reason that sounded temporary, and the salon cut 2 slow weekday shifts. Her car needed brakes. The apartment she liked wanted a larger deposit than she expected, and none of those things sounded outrageous by themselves. I had heard worse excuses from subcontractors before breakfast, and still, I kept treating Megan like my sister, not a project. I did not want to inspect her life. I wanted her to succeed without feeling watched, and that was the story I told myself. The truth was less flattering. I did not want the argument. Megan could make a simple boundary feel like a character trial. If I said no, she rarely argued about the actual no, and she argued about what the no supposedly revealed about me. I was rigid. I was cold. I cared more about plans than people, and she could turn a calendar into a verdict on my personality. So I kept choosing 1 more week of peace, and one Saturday in June, I stopped by to check a slow leak under the kitchen sink. Megan was at work. She had told me to let myself in with my owner key. I brought a wrench, a flashlight, and a new supply line because that is the kind of person I am, and there were 2 coffee mugs in the sink. That meant nothing. There were 2 sets of shoes by the door. That meant a little more. Then I saw a pink suitcase standing open in the spare bedroom. I texted Megan, "Is someone staying here?" She answered almost at once. My friend Lee. She said Lee would stay for just a couple weeks, and I stared at the message. I reminded her that we had talked about roommates, and she called before I could type anything else. "She is not a roommate," Megan said. "There is a suitcase in the spare room." Because she is staying over. For 2 weeks, maybe 3, her building has a plumbing issue. I crouched under my own sink and closed my eyes. Megan, you needed temporary housing too. That is exactly why I'm helping her. That doesn't make my rule disappear. She isn't paying me. I had not asked that yet, and the answer landed strangely. Okay, I said, then I need her gone when the building issue is fixed. Of course. And I need you to ask me before someone stays that long. Megan sighed. Fine. The sigh bothered me more than the word, and it sounded like I was asking permission to set a rule in my own condo. I finished the repair and left anyway. That night, Megan sent me a heart emoji and a picture of the dry cabinet. I almost convinced myself I had overreacted. When I did, the condo looked fine. That was important. There were no holes in the walls, no broken doors, no piles of trash. Megan watered the balcony plants, and she kept the kitchen clean. If she had been reckless with the property, I might have acted sooner. Instead, she was careful with the physical place. It was my authority she was wearing down, and Lee was there the next time I visited. She was carrying folded towels from the dryer, and Megan introduced us like there was nothing unusual about it. This is Lee, Lee smiled. Finally, I've heard so much about you. Hopefully the good parts. Megan laughed too loudly. Lee seemed nice. That made the situation harder, not easier. She was polite. She had a steady job at a dental office. She asked before moving her car from the loading area, nothing about her screamed problem. I looked at Megan. How long is the plumbing thing taking? Lee frowned. What plumbing thing? The room went still. Megan answered before I could. Her old building, the repairs. Lee looked from Megan to me. Oh, right. It was a bad lie, not dramatic, not clever, just bad. I did not confront Megan in front of her friend. That was another mistake, and after Lee left for work, I asked what was going on. Megan folded her arms. She had to leave her old place. So there was no plumbing problem. There were problems. That is not what you told me at all. You would have said no. There it was, not confusion, strategy. I remember the click of the air conditioner behind us. I remember a delivery truck backing up in the alley, and tiny sounds became very clear because I was trying not to raise my voice. You don't get to lie because you think I'll say no. I was trying to help someone out. With my property. You're not using the room? That is not the point. It kind of is. No, Megan, it really is. She rolled her eyes. I should have ended her stay right then. Instead, I gave her a deadline for Lee to leave, and I sent it by text after I got home. Megan replied with a thumbs up, and Lee was supposed to be gone by the end of the month. She was not. At the end of the month, Megan told me Leah had found a new place but could not move in for another 10 days. I agreed to 10 days, then Lee's new place supposedly had a delayed inspection. Another week. The excuses kept arriving in small pieces, and I began to feel ridiculous. At work, I would stop a contractor if a schedule slipped by one day without an explanation. At home, my sister could move a person into my condo and make me feel unreasonable for noticing, and I finally sent Megan a longer message. This arrangement is ending. Lee needs to make other housing plans, and you also need to choose a move-out date. I helped because you were in a crisis, and this cannot become permanent. Megan did not answer for 4 hours, then she wrote, I get it. That was all. For the next few weeks, things got quiet, and Megan paid the utilities. Lee stayed mostly invisible, and I received no complaints from neighbors. I was busy enough to mistake the absence of noise for progress. Then Carla from the condo management office emailed me. She had met Lee in the lobby. Lee asked about a parking permit because she would be staying long-term. Carla had told her the unit owner needed to approve it. Megan apparently heard about that conversation, and she emailed Carla before I ever knew it happened. That email became the first hard piece of the pattern. Megan wrote that she was handling the unit for me while I was busy with work. She said Lee was an approved tenant, and she asked Carla to add Lee to the resident list. Carla replied that she needed documentation. Megan sent a lease. That was the attachment I opened in the unfinished office. By then, I had already given Megan months of extra time, and I had already caught one lie about Lee. I had already told her the arrangement had to end, and she did not misunderstand my boundary. She went around it. When I left work that afternoon, I drove to the condo instead of going home. Megan's car was in the lot when I arrived. Leas was too. I sat behind the wheel for a full minute before I went inside. I had printed the lease at work. The pages were folded in my bag because I had gripped them too hard, and I knocked even though I still had a key. Lee opened the door. "Oh, hey. Is Megan here? She's in the shower." Lee stepped aside. I stayed in the hall. "Could you ask her to come out when she's dressed?" Lee's smile faded. "Sure." Megan appeared a few minutes later with wet hair and a sweatshirt. She saw my face and then the papers in my hand, and her expression changed before I said a word. "What happened?" I held up the lease. "You tell me." She went very still. Lee looked at the pages. "What is that?" I turned toward her. "Did you sign a lease for this condo?" Lee's face lost color. Megan cut in. "Nora, can we talk privately?" "No." "Lee is on the document." Lee looked at Megan. "You said she knew." Megan rubbed both hands over her face. "I said I was handling it. You said your sister was fine with it." "I said she would be." Lee stared at her. "That is not the same thing." It was the first time I realized Lee might have been lied to almost as much as I had. I asked her one question. "Have you paid Megan anything for this lease?" Lee looked embarrassed. "Yes." "How much?" "The deposit and the first month." My stomach dropped. That was $3,000, and Megan snapped her head toward Lee. "You didn't need to tell her every detail." Lee gave a short, shocked laugh. "Apparently I did." I looked at my sister. "You took $3,000 on a lease for my condo. I was going to talk to you." "When?" "Before the start date. The start date is in less than 2 weeks." "I know. So your plan was to sign it first and ask me later." "I knew you would make this harder than it needed to be." That sentence did something useful, and it removed the last excuse I had been building for her. She knew I would object. She had signed anyway. I asked Lee when she first started staying there, and she told me the truth. She had moved into the spare room almost 3 months earlier. There had been no plumbing emergency, and she had been paying Megan every month. Megan closed her eyes, and I felt heat rise into my face. "You told me she wasn't paying you. She was helping with the expenses. That is paying you. She bought groceries too. Did she pay you money?" Megan's jaw tightened. "Yes." "How much?" "That is between me and her." "No, not anymore," Lee answered. She had been giving Megan monthly payments for the room, and Megan had called it a contribution. Then Megan said she planned to move in with a man she had been dating, which would leave the whole condo open. That was when the new lease appeared. I had not even known there was a man. Megan had built a second version of her life inside my property, and in that version, she chose who lived there. She collected money. She promised future access, and I existed somewhere offstage as the boring sister who handled paperwork. "Who does Lee think owns this place?" I asked. Megan's eyes flashed. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Humiliate me." I asked a question. Lee looked miserable. Megan said it was a family property. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "It is not." Megan stepped toward me. "Nora." "I bought this condo. I know that." "Then why would you tell her it was family property?" "I said you owned it." Lee shook her head. "Not exactly." Megan turned on her. "Can you stop?" "No," Lee said. "I actually can't." That was the first moment the balance changed, and until then, Megan had been managing 2 separate stories. One was for me, one was for Lee. The lease put both stories in the same room. I did not yell. I wanted to. Instead, I told Lee I had never authorized Megan to lease the condo. I said I was not going to sign anything that night, and I also told her I would not give legal advice about what the document meant for her. I needed to speak with someone who knew local housing law, and Lee nodded quickly. "Okay," Megan scoffed. "You're making this sound like a crime." I'm making it sound like a lease I didn't authorize. You left the place empty. It was empty because I was between tenants. And then I lived here for months. Because I let you, that has to count for something. It counted as help. Megan's mouth hardened. There it is. What? The way you always talk about helping me. I did help you. You make it sound like I should bow. No, I expected you not to rent out my condo. Lee stepped back toward the kitchen. I'm going to give you two some space. I stopped her. Please don't leave because you think I'm angry at you. I signed something I should have checked. You were told the owner approved it. Megan made a noise under her breath. I ignored it. I need time to sort this out, I told Lee. She nodded. Then she went into the spare room and closed the door, and Megan waited until the latch clicked. You had to make me look like a scammer. I did not type your name under landlord. You know what I mean? No, I don't. You came in here with papers like you caught me stealing. You took money for a property you don't own. I have been taking care of this place. That does not make it yours. I fixed the garbage disposal myself. With the maintenance number I gave you, I painted the balcony chairs myself. They cost $40. I kept the place occupied. I stared at her. You think living here was a service to me? Partly, yes. That answer was so sincere that it scared me more than a lie. Megan was not just defending a bad choice, and she had built a moral claim around it. She believed months of living in my condo had created a kind of ownership that the deed had failed to recognize. I pulled the spare key from my bag. For one wild second, I wanted to demand hers back and tell her to leave that night. Then I stopped. I knew enough to know I did not know enough, and Megan had been living there for months. Lee was there too. I was not going to create a bigger mess by changing locks or throwing belongings into the hall because I was angry. I'm talking to a housing attorney tomorrow, I said. Megan laughed. Of course you are. What does that mean? It means you turn everything into a process. I turn leases into a process, yes. We could just talk. We are talking. No, you are building a case. You signed a lease. She looked away. That ended the conversation, and I went home with the same printed pages I had brought in. I did not take any keys. I did not shut off anything. I did not touch Lee's belongings. I did not touch Megan's, and I also did not sleep much. Around midnight, Megan sent me a text. Please don't blow up my life over this. I read it several times, and the wording got under my skin. Not our relationship. Not Lee's money. Not my property. Her life. I typed a long answer, deleted it, and set my phone face down. The next morning, I called a local housing attorney, and I explained the arrangement as plainly as I could. My sister had moved into my condo with permission. There was no rent between us. The stay had gone far beyond the original 3 months, and she had brought in another person and signed a lease without my authority. The attorney did not give me a dramatic speech. I appreciated that. He told me not to improvise. No lock changes while Megan still had a right to occupy the unit. No utility games. No removing property. I needed a written plan based on the actual arrangement, and I needed to follow the proper process if Megan refused to leave. That was all I needed. I was not looking for a weapon. I was looking for a line I could stand behind. By lunch, I had sent the attorney the lease, my old texts with Megan, and the message where she admitted Lee was staying there. I also forwarded Carla's email chain, then I made one more decision. I asked Carla for no favors. I did not ask her to ban Megan. I did not ask her to confront Lee. I only asked her to preserve the resident submission and to route any future occupancy changes to me as the recorded owner. Carla replied, absolutely. That one word felt steadier than anything my sister had said in months, and for the next 2 days, Megan barely contacted me. That silence was unusual. She normally filled any conflict with messages until someone gave her an emotional answer, but this time, she sent only practical questions. Do I still pay electric this month? Yes. Can Lee keep parking in the visitor area for now? I answered, asked Carla about the building rules, Then Megan asked if I was really getting a lawyer involved. I did not answer that one. On Friday evening, Lee called me, and I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I remembered how she had looked when the truth came apart in front of her. "Hi, I hope this is okay." "It's okay." She took a breath. "I think you need to see some messages." My stomach tightened. "From Megan?" "Yes." Lee said she had spent the day reading back through their texts. Things that sounded normal before now looked different. Megan had told her several times that I was technical about the condo but would come around. She had also said I trusted her to manage it because I was too busy. I asked Lee to send only what she was comfortable sharing. A few minutes later, screenshots started arriving, and the first one was from early summer. Lee had asked, "Does your sister know I'm paying you?" Megan had replied, "She knows I'm handling the place." That was false. Another message came a week later, and Lee had asked whether she should meet me before staying longer. Megan wrote, "Don't worry about Nora. She likes control." She wrote that once I saw steady money, I would stop making it a thing, and I read that sentence twice. It did not prove every motive Megan had, and it did prove one thing clearly. She expected me to object. She planned to use the money as leverage after the fact. The final screenshot hurt the most. Lee had asked whether Megan could really promise the whole condo once she moved out, and Megan replied, "It's basically mine to manage now. Nora hasn't needed it in months anyway. Basically mine." Those two words sat in my chest like a stone, and I sent the screenshots to the attorney. Then I saved copies with the rest of the file, and after that I called Megan. She answered with, "What now?" "I saw your messages to Lee." Silence. "Then she sent you our private texts. She sent messages about my property. That is unbelievably shady." I almost laughed. "You signed my name out of the decision and you're worried about shady?" "I did not sign your name. You represented yourself as the landlord." "I was trying to make a plan. With someone else's condo. You keep saying that like I don't understand who owns it. Then act like you actually understand." Megan's voice sharpened. "You know what? Fine, I made a mistake." "A mistake is not the same as a plan." "Oh, spare me." "No, you love this." That stopped me. "What?" "You love being right." I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the folder in front of me. "I would love to have never opened that lease. You finally have proof that I'm the irresponsible sister." "Congratulations. This is not about who you were at 16. It always is with you." "I'm not talking about high school," I said. "You don't have to." "I'm talking about a lease." "You are talking about control again." "Yes, control of my own property." She went quiet. Then she said something much softer. "I needed the money." There it was, not the whole truth, but a real piece of it. "For what?" "I'm moving out." "With the guy you're seeing." "His name is Ryan." "Okay, with Ryan?" "Yes." "And you needed Lee's deposit to move?" Megan did not answer. I felt my stomach drop again. "Did you spend it?" "It's not gone." "That wasn't my question." "I used some of it. For your new place." "For the deposit and moving costs." I stood up from the table. Lee had paid Megan $3,000 for housing Megan did not own, and Megan had already used part of that money to fund her own exit. "How much is left?" "I can replace it." "How much?" "Enough." "Megan," I said I can replace it. That meant not enough. I closed my eyes. "Lee needs to know. She knows I'm moving. She needs to know you may not be able to refund her immediately." "She is not asking for a refund. She might after she finds out I did not approve the lease. You're the one making that happen." "No, you made that happen when you signed it." Megan hung up. I stood there with my phone in my hand and realized I had reached the point where helping her would mean helping her hide what she had done. That was new. I could forgive chaos. I could forgive bad judgment. I could not become part of the cover story. The next morning, I met Lee at a coffee shop near the condo. I did not ask Megan for permission, and Lee was an adult, and she had asked to speak with me. She looked exhausted. "I'm sorry," she said before we sat down. "You don't owe me an apology for what you were told. I should have checked the owner." Maybe, but she's my sister. I understand why you trusted her. Lee wrapped both hands around her coffee. Is she really moving? That is what she told me. She told me you wanted a long-term tenant. I do, eventually. Lee looked up. But not me. I don't know you well enough to make that decision. And I'm not going to turn an unauthorized lease into an approved one because money already changed hands. She nodded. That makes sense. I could see that it hurt anyway, and she had planned around the condo. She had packed things, and she had given notice where she was staying before Megan. She had believed she had stable housing lined up, and Megan's choice had consequences beyond me. I'm not going to throw your things into the street, I said. I'm getting proper advice about everyone's status. I'll give you information in writing once I have it. Thank you, and you should get your own advice if you need it. She nodded again. Then she told me something I had not known. Megan had shown her photos of the condo before Lee ever moved into the spare room. She had talked about the place like an asset she was improving. She had said the old tenants left it, half dead, and that she was making it desirable again. That stung more than it should have, and the old tenants had left the condo clean. I had replaced flooring, painted walls, and repaired the balcony door before Megan moved in, and Megan had bought 2 plants and a woven rug. She had turned presence into contribution, then contribution into authority. Then authority became ownership, and Lee looked embarrassed as she spoke. I believed her because she sounded so sure. So did I. That was the hardest part to admit. I had believed Megan every time she said she was almost ready. I had accepted each delay because it was easier than asking whether the whole arrangement had changed. My sister crossed the line, but I kept moving the line for her. That was my part. It did not make us equally responsible, and it did mean I had something to change. When I got home, I pulled up the first text I had sent Megan about the condo. 3 months, utilities. No roommates or subletting, and she had to ask before making changes. It was all there in plain language, and I had not failed to communicate. I had failed to enforce. That difference mattered. By Monday, the attorney sent me a written outline, and the exact steps depended on how Megan's occupancy was treated, so I was not going to guess. He gave me the notice he wanted me to use and the date that fit the facts he had reviewed. He also told me something simple. Do not promise Lee an outcome you cannot legally promise. That was useful. I could tell Lee what I had and had not authorized. I could preserve records, and I could follow the process for ending Megan's occupancy. I could not erase every consequence in one afternoon. I hated that. Fixing was still my reflex. For years, if Megan dropped a plate, I reached for the broom, and this time, the broken thing was not mine to sweep into a neat pile. That week, I made a decision that felt small on paper and enormous in my body. I was ending Megan's stay, not waiting until she found the perfect apartment. I would not wait until Ryan was ready or until Mom felt comfortable. On the date in the notice. I printed the notice at work because I did not trust my home printer, and the paper looked ordinary. That annoyed me. I had spent months making excuses, losing sleep, and questioning my own judgment, and the page that ended all that drama was plain white with black type. I read every line twice. Then I put it in a folder with the lease, and I asked Megan to meet me at the condo the next evening. She said she was busy, and I told her I was coming at 6 and that this was about her occupancy. She replied with a single cold word. Fine. When I arrived, Lee was not there. Megan was sitting at the kitchen table with her arms folded. She had removed the little balcony table, and boxes were stacked near the wall. For 1 second, I felt hopeful, then she saw the folder. You actually did it. I told you I would. You hired a lawyer against your own sister. I got legal advice about my property. Same thing. No, I sat across from her. I'm giving you written notice that your stay is ending. Megan did not touch the paper. When? I told her the date. Her eyes widened. That's ridiculous. It's the date I was advised to use. I can't be out by then. You've been planning to move in with Ryan. That is not settled. You told me it was. Things changed. Something inside me almost moved toward rescue. Almost. Then I remembered the $3,000. Your plans can change. My decision is not. Megan pushed back from the table. So what happens if I just don't go? I follow the process I was told to follow. You'd take me to court. I hope I don't have to, she laughed without humor. You hear yourself, right? Yes. No, you don't. She stood and paced to the window. You have a good job, you have your apartment, you have this place. I finally get stable, and you decide to rip it out from under me. I gave you this place so you could get stable, and I did. You rented it to someone else already, because I was trying to move forward, with money you had no right to collect. I was going to pay you. I never agreed to rent the condo through you, because you never let me finish a plan. I looked at her. Finish it now. She stopped pacing. Fine, Lee gets the condo, you get the rent, I move out, everyone wins. No, why? Because I didn't choose Lee as a tenant. She has a job. That is not the point. She pays on time. You don't know what my screening process is. You're punishing her because you're mad at me. That one landed where she wanted it to, and I hated the idea of Lee getting hurt because of our fight. Megan saw that. See, she said, you know I'm right. No, I know you put her in the middle. You could take her out of the middle by saying yes. And teach you that you can make contracts for me if you create enough pressure? Megan looked away. That was the question she could not answer, and I slid the notice toward her. You need to take this. She did not. I left it on the table and sent her the same document electronically after I got home. I also kept the record the attorney told me to keep. The next morning, Mom called before I had coffee, and Megan had called her first. Of course she had. Your sister is panicking, Mom said. I know. Can you give her more time? No, Mom sighed. Nora, that's my answer. I understand you're angry. This isn't just anger. She made a truly terrible decision. She made several. I'm not defending the lease. Then don't ask me to reward it. Mom was quiet. I regretted the sharpness as soon as I said it, and she had not signed anything. She had not taken any of Lee's money. I'm sorry, I said. I know you're trying to keep us from blowing up. I am, but every extra day has become another reason for Megan to decide the rules are optional. Mom did not answer me for a while, then she asked, What do you want me to do? The question surprised me. Nothing. Nothing. Please don't negotiate me down for her. Mom exhaled. Okay, that mattered, not because Mom suddenly chose a side, she did not. But she stopped turning my boundary into a family discussion. Megan noticed. 2 days later, she sent me a long message accusing me of humiliating her, and she said Lee was avoiding her. Ryan had told her he needed more time before they lived together, and she said the notice had made everything worse. I read the whole message, then I answered only the parts that required answers. The move-out date remains the same, and please return all keys when you leave. Any money Lee paid you needs to be handled between you and Lee. Megan responded immediately, You're really not helping with the refund? No, you can afford it. That sentence made me laugh out loud in my empty apartment. I typed carefully. My ability to pay does not make your debt mine. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, she wrote, You care more about being right than about people. I did not answer. The old Nora would have. She would have written paragraphs explaining that she cared deeply, and she would have listed every favor she had ever done. She would have tried to prove her goodness to the person benefiting from it, and I was tired of auditioning for the role of decent sister. I knew what I had done. I knew what she had done. That had to be enough. Lee moved most of her belongings out the following weekend, and she found a furnished room through a coworker. She told me she wanted nothing to do with the full unit lease anymore, and that removed one practical problem. It did not remove Megan's, and Lee asked Megan for the $3,000 back. Megan had less than half of it left. I learned that from Lee, not from Megan, and Megan offered to repay her in installments. Lee agreed only after Megan put the plan in writing. I was not part of that agreement. I did not cosign it. I did not advance the money, and that was harder than I expected. I kept imagining how easy it would be to transfer the refund myself. I had savings. I could make Lee whole, then chase Megan later, and that would have felt efficient. It also would have repeated the oldest pattern in our family. Megan made the emergency, and I made the emergency disappear. So I did nothing. About a week before the move-out date, Carla called me again. Megan came by the office. My shoulders tightened. What did she want? She asked whether Lee could still get a parking permit if you approved the lease later. I closed my eyes. Did she submit anything new? No. Good. Carla hesitated. She also said you were reconsidering. I'm not. I figured I should check. Thank you. After we hung up, I sent Megan one sentence. I am not reconsidering Lee's lease. She replied, I know. I stared at those words. If she knew, why was she still testing the edge? The answer came the next day, and Lee forwarded me a message from Megan. Don't worry. Nora always needs time to calm down. I'm giving you the keys on Saturday so you can keep moving your stuff in if you want. I called Lee immediately. Are you planning to take keys from her? No. Good. I thought you should know. Thank you. Lee sounded angry now, not confused. She keeps acting like if she completes enough steps, you'll have to accept it. That is exactly what she's doing. The move-out deadline was still several days away, and Megan still had lawful access to the condo under the process I was following. But she had no authority from me to hand the property to a new tenant, and I called the attorney. Then I called Carla. I was careful with both conversations, and I did not ask anyone to remove Megan early. I did not ask for a lock change. I did not ask Carla to block Megan's own building access before the deadline. I only made my position clear: no new resident approval, no new parking permit, no representation that Megan could act for me. Then I sent Lee the same thing in writing, and I thought that would end the key idea. It did not. Saturday morning, Lee texted me. Megan says she wants to meet at the condo at noon. She says she is giving me the keys and making you deal with reality. I read that sentence while standing in the grocery store, and my cart was half full. I left it beside a display of paper towels and walked outside. For months, I had been reacting to Megan one small step at a time. One extension, one guest, one lie, one unauthorized payment, one lease. Now she wanted to create a final physical fact, a key in Lee's hand. Then she wanted that fact to become my problem, and I was done arriving after the decision. I called Lee. Will you meet her? Yes, if you're there. I'll be there. Then I called Carla and asked whether she could be present in the lobby as the building manager. She said yes. I printed the owner record from my closing file, the unauthorized lease, the text where Megan called the condo basically hers to manage, and the notice ending her stay. I did not need all of them to prove one thing. I wanted every claim in the room to have an answer, so at 11:45, I parked across the street from my condo. The folder was on the passenger seat, and for the first time since that first email, my hands were steady. Carla was already in the lobby when I walked in. She had a clipboard under one arm and the careful expression of someone who had no interest in joining a family fight. Just so we're clear, she said, I'm here for the building records. That's all I need. Lee arrived a few minutes later with a canvas tote and no boxes. That told me she had made her decision, and Megan came down the stairs at noon. She was holding a silver key ring. My key ring. The spare set I had handed her months earlier had a blue rubber tag on it. I recognized the little chip near the hole. She had copied the unit key twice and added both fresh brass keys beside it. For a second, nobody spoke, then Megan looked at Carla. Why is she here? Carla answered for herself. You asked about adding a resident. Nora asked me to confirm the building's records. Megan looked at Lee. I really thought this was between us. Lee shook her head. It stopped being between us when I found out you weren't the landlord. Megan's face tightened, and I could see her deciding which argument to use first. She chose confidence. Okay, great, everyone's here. She held up the keys. Lee already paid. She has a signed lease. I'm moving out. Nora wants a tenant anyway. This solves the whole stupid problem. No, I said. Megan ignored me and kept talking to Lee. You can start bringing your stuff back today. Lee did not take the keys, and Megan's hand stayed in the air. No, I said again. This time, she looked at me. You cannot keep saying no without offering a solution. I don't owe you a different answer because you dislike this one. She paid. You took the payment. She needs housing. You promised housing you did not own. Megan dropped her hand. So that's it? You're going to punish her to teach me a lesson? Lee spoke before I could. Stop using me for that. Megan blinked. I'm trying to help you. No, you're trying to make Nora responsible for what you told me. The lobby went quiet. Carla looked down at her clipboard and I almost felt sorry for Megan. Almost. Then she turned back to me. You could approve it right now. I could consider any applicant through the process I choose. Listen to yourself. You sound like a bank. I sound like the owner. Megan laughed. There, finally. What? You said it. I have never hidden it. You act like buying this place made you some kind of authority over everyone in it. Over everyone? No. I pointed toward the folder in my hand. Over who signs a lease for my condo? Yes. Megan crossed her arms. You weren't even using this place until I made it worth something. There it was. It was the sentence she had been building toward for months, and I looked at the lobby door behind her. I could see the reflection of the street in the glass. I remembered bringing her groceries through that door, and I remembered the first night she slept upstairs because she had nowhere else ready. Then I looked back at her. I gave you somewhere to recover. You turned my kindness into authority I never gave you. Megan's expression changed. Not much. Enough. She looked down at the keys. You love saying things like that. Then let's keep it simple. I opened the folder. I gave Leah a copy of the lease Megan had signed. This document did not come from me. Then I gave her a short written statement confirming I had never authorized Megan to lease the condo on my behalf. I am not adopting it now. Lee nodded. I understand. I turned to Carla. Please keep routing any resident or leasing approval for my unit to me. Already noted, she said. Then I faced Megan. Your move-out date has not changed. She stared at me. You brought an audience for an eviction speech. No. Carla is here because you involved the building office. Lee is here because you involved her money and housing. I held up the notice. And you already received this notice. Megan's eyes filled. That hurt. I wish I could say it did not, but she was still my sister. But tears did not turn her signature into mine. I really thought you'd calm down, she said. I am calm. That's worse. Maybe, she shook her head. Mom thinks this is too much. Mom stopped negotiating for you. That landed. Megan looked genuinely surprised. She told you that? She asked what I needed. I told her not to negotiate my boundary. Megan's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, the family pattern she knew was not waiting behind me to soften the consequence. She looked at Lee. Do you want the keys or not? Lee stepped back. No. Megan's face went red. I'm trying to give you what you paid for. You can't. I can hand you a key. That doesn't make the lease yours to give. Megan looked at me again. You turned her against me. No, Lee said. The truth did. I did not enjoy that line. It was too sharp for the moment, but I understood why she said it. Megan had spent weeks telling both of us that reality would bend if she kept moving fast enough. Now reality had stopped. She closed her fist around the keys. What do you want from me, Nora? The question came out small. Move out by the date in the notice. Return every key. Repay Lee. And then what? Then I manage my condo. What about us? I swallowed. That depends on what happens after you stop treating my boundaries like opening bids. Megan stared at me for a long time. Then she said, So you're choosing a condo over your sister. I had heard versions of that sentence my whole life. Choose peace over the rule. Choose family over the deadline. Choose compassion over the consequence. The choice was always described as love versus some cold object, and it was never described as my sister choosing respect over getting her way. "I'm not choosing a condo over you," I said. "I'm choosing not to give you my property to prove I love you." Nobody spoke. That was the end of the argument for me, and Megan looked at the keys again. Then she shoved them into her pocket. "Fine." She walked past us and went upstairs. I did not follow. I did not need the last word, and the important thing had already happened. Lee had refused the keys. Carla had the correct owner instructions, and the unauthorized lease had not become mine. Megan's deadline was still moving toward us. A few minutes later, I left the building. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired, but the tiredness was clean. I was no longer carrying the extra weight of pretending there was a compromise that could make everyone happy. There was only the truth and what each of us did with it, and Megan moved out before the deadline. Not gracefully, not early, but she moved. Ryan did not take her in, and she rented a room from a coworker instead. It was smaller than the condo and farther from the salon. For once, I did not solve that, and on her last day, she texted me that the unit was empty. I met Carla there that afternoon, and the blue-tagged key sat on the kitchen counter. 2 copies were beside it. Megan had also left the mailbox key and the building fob. I counted them. Then I checked the rooms. The condo was clean. The white cabinets were still white, and the floor still leaned toward the window. The balcony had 2 pale circles where Megan's planters had sat, and I stood there longer than I expected. This was the same place. I was not. After the unit was fully returned to me, I had the locks changed, and Carla updated the building records. Megan's fob was deactivated because she was no longer a resident. The order mattered to me, and I did not lock her out to win a fight. I waited until the place was returned, then I closed access. Lee never moved back in. She stayed with her coworker and found another apartment a few months later, and Megan repaid the $3,000 in installments. Lee told me when the final payment cleared. I was glad. I did not reimburse Megan for any of it. I also did not charge her for ordinary wear in the condo just because I was angry, and I wanted the consequence to match the harm, not become revenge. My relationship with Megan went quiet for a while, and we did not have a dramatic reconciliation. There was no restaurant apology with perfect words, and she sent me a birthday text. I thanked her. A month later, she asked if I wanted a box of old family photos she had found. I said yes. That was about it. Over the next year, I watched for that. Megan stopped asking me to rescue every bad month. When she needed money for a car repair, she told me she had made a payment plan before she ever called. When Mom tried to pull me into one of Megan's scheduling problems, Megan told her to leave me out of it. Those changes mattered more than a speech, and they did not erase the lease. They showed me she had finally understood at least part of the boundary. I changed too. I stopped confusing a generous answer with an endless answer, and if I offered help, I gave it a shape. I said what it covered. I said when it ended. Then I let the end be real. The condo stayed empty for several weeks while I replaced the dishwasher and touched up the paint. After that, I hired a licensed property manager to handle applications and routine tenant issues. I still made the owner decisions. I just stopped trying to be landlord, sister, fixer, and peacekeeper at the same time, and the next tenant was a teacher named Camille. She applied through the regular process, and her references checked out. She read the lease carefully and asked good questions about parking and maintenance. On signing day, I sat across from her at the little kitchen table. It was the same kitchen where I had once handed Megan a free key, and the new lease was open between us. I checked the address, I checked the rent. Then my eyes moved to the landlord line. My name was there, Nora Ellis. Nothing dramatic happened when I signed it. No one clapped. No one lost. A tenant got a home under terms she understood, and I got a tenant I had actually chosen. The condo became a rental again instead of a family argument with walls, and before I left, I walked onto the balcony. The maples in the alley had turned green again, and I thought about the first key I gave Megan and the copies she later tried to pass along. A key can open a door. It cannot create ownership, and love cannot do that either. Love can make you generous. It can make you patient. Sometimes it can make you wait longer than you should, but love does not require pretending that another person's choice is now your obligation. Megan had needed a place to recover. I gave her one. What she lost was the right to treat that gift like permanent authority. What I gained was not just control of a condo. I gained a boundary that still worked when someone I loved was angry about it, and that was the part I had been missing for years. Where would you have drawn the line? At the hidden roommate, the first payment, or the lease with someone else's name under landlord?